Rolex is one of the most popular brands in the world, not just in the watch industry, in the world. Today, Rolex controls almost every step of its production process, from research and development to gold productions, movement manufacturing, assembly, testing, quality control. Nearly everything happens inside the company. This approach is called vertical integration. It gives Rolex an extraordinary level of control over quality and consistency. But here's what makes the story fascinating. Rolex produces only around 1 million watches each year, yet demand is far higher than supply. People wait months, sometimes years, just for the chance to buy certain models. So, how did the watch company create this level of demand? How did a brand founded by an orphan become one of the most respected luxury companies in history? And perhaps most importantly, why did its founder choose to focus on wristwatches at a time when most people believed they had no future? To answer the questions, we need to go to back more than a century. The story begins in Germany in 1881. That year, a boy named Hans Wilsdorf was born. At first, there was nothing unusual about his life. But everything changed when he was just 12 years old. Both of his parents passed away, leaving him orphaned at very young age. He was sent to a boarding school where he learned discipline, hard work, and independence. Those lessons would stay with him for the rest of his life. At the time, nobody could have imagined that this young orphan would one of the day build one of the most powerful brands in the world. But the foundation was already being laid. After finishing his school, Hans began working for a company that exported pearls. The job had nothing to do with watches, but it taught him something incredibly valuable. He gained a comprehensive understanding of international business operations, cross-border product sales, and customer buying decisions. And most importantly, he learned that luxury products are not purchased only because of quality. They are purchased because of trust, reputation, and status. A few years later, Hans moved to Switzerland and joined a watch exporting company called Kuno. This decision changed everything. For the first time, he was exposed to the watch industry from the inside. He studied manufacturing, distribution, sales, customer behavior, and economics of the industry. While most employees focused on their daily tasks, Hans focused on understanding the entire business. He wanted to know how everything worked. And during this period, he noticed an opportunities that almost everyone else ignored. In the early 1900s, wristwatches had a serious image problem. Most men carried pocket watches. Wristwatches were often seen as accessories for women rather than reliable tools for telling time. There were good reasons for this. They were less accurate. They were easier to damage. Dust could enter the case. Water could ruin the movement. Because of these issues, most people believed wristwatches would never replace pocket watches. To many experts, betting on wristwatches seemed like a terrible idea. But Hans Wilsdorf saw things differently. While others saw limitations, he saw potential. While others looked at the present, he looked at the future. He believed the people would eventually want something more convenient than a pocket watches. He believed the future would be worn on the wrist. But there was one major challenge. How do you convince the world to trust something it already doubts? The question word eventually led to the creations of Rolex. In 1905, Hans Wilsdorf and his business partner Alfred Davids founded a company in London called Wilsdorf and Davids. At the beginning, they were not manufacturing complete watches. Instead, they imported high-quality Swiss movements and assembled watches in England. But Hans had a much bigger vision. He wanted to build the most reliable wristwatches in the world. At a time when most people doubted wristwatches, this was a risky bet. Yet Hans believed that the creates opportunities of an exit where others see problems. In 1908, Hans made an important decision. He wanted a brand name the people around the world could easily remember. A name that was short, easy to pronounce, easy to recognize, and simple enough to fit on a watch dial. Eventually, he chose a name that would become one of the most valuable brands in the history. Rolex. At the time, it was just a name, but Hans understood something many entrepreneurs overlook. Products can be copied. Brands are much hard to copy. Rolex did not become successful because of advertising. Rolex became successful because it solved a real problem. At the time, wristwatches were not trusted for their accuracy. Most people believed pocket watches were far more reliable. Hans wanted to change that perception. In 1910, a Rolex wristwatch became the first wristwatch in the world to receive a Swiss certificate of chronometric precision. That achievement shocked the industry, but Hans wasn't finished. In 1940, Rolex received the Class A precision certificate from the Kew Observatory in England. This level of recognition was usually reserved for marine chronometers and the finest pocket watches. For the first time, Rolex proved that a wristwatch could be just as accurate as the best timepieces in the world. Trust was beginning to replace doubt. Solving the accuracy problem was only the beginning. Another challenge remained: water and dust. In the early 19s, even small amounts of moisture could damage a watch movement. This was a major concern for customers. In 1926, Rolex introduced the Oyster, the world's first commercial successful waterproof wristwatch. Its seal case protected the movement from water and dust. Today, waterproof watches seem normal, but at the time, this innovation changed the industry forever. Rolex wasn't simply selling a watch. It was selling pieces of mind. In 1927, Rolex launched one of the smart marketing campaigns in the business history. A British swimmer named Marshall Gleist attempted to swim across the English Channel while wearing a Rolex Oyster. After more than 10 hours in cold seawater, the watch continued to function perfectly. Rolex immediately turned the event into a marketing campaign. They didn't tell customers the watch was waterproof. That difference changed everything. Instead of marketing promises, Rolex provided proof. Today, many people consider this one of the earliest examples of influencer marketing. Over time, Rolex began associating its watches with extraordinary achievements. Mountain climbers, deep sea explorers, professional athletics, science statistics, racing drivers, and adventurers. The company understood something many businesses still fail to understand today. People don't just buy products, they buy serious identity symbol of success. Rolex was no longer selling watches. Rolex was selling achievements. One of Rolex's biggest advantages today is vertical integration. Most companies rely heavily on outside suppliers. Rolex took a different path. Gold production, case manufacturing, bracelet production, dial creation, movement development, assembly, testing, quality, almost everything happens within the Rolex ecosystem. This gives the company an extraordinary level of control over quality. It also makes Rolex extremely difficult to copy. Rolex uses another powerful strategy: scarcity. Most companies try to produce as much as possible. Rolex does the opposite. The companies limit supply while demand continues to grow. As a result, waiting lists have become common. Some customers wait years to purchase certain models. This creates a powerful psychological effect. People tend to value things more when they are difficult to obtain. Rolex transforms scarcity into desirability and desirability into prestige. Today, most people don't buy a Rolex simply to tell time. A smartphone can do that. People buy Rolex because of what it represents: achievement, discipline, recognition, status. A Rolex is more than a watch. It is a symbol that tells a story about the person wearing it. And the emotional value is often more powerful than the product itself. The Rolex story teaches several powerful business lessons. First, look for opportunities that others ignore. Second, solve a real problem before trying to build a brand. Third, show customers proof instead of marketing promises. Fourth, premium prices comes from perceived value, not just product quality. Finally, great companies build products, legendary companies build brands.